Greetings and welcome to Gripping Horror. A diver once compared Cow Springs to a piece of Japanese origami sculpture. At first glance, there does not appear to be that much to it. Yet, as one probes deeper, it keeps unfolding to reveal more and more. There was a fatality here during Memorial Day weekend, 2003. Chris Henson was found in the most challenging section of the cave, called the upstream section solo, with gas in the doubles and a full buddy bottle. Intent on documenting the intricate upstream section, experienced diver Marian M. Koshkosh embarked on the exploration of Cow Springs on January the 6th, 2023. Similarly to Chris, he was diving solo, and unfortunately, similar to Chris, this trip would also end in tragedy. This is the Cow Springs disaster of 2023. Marian Koshkosh was born on December the 21st, 1963, in Gliwice, Poland. As the second of 6 children, Marian grew up in a close-knit home. From a young age, he had a deep love for adventure. He was an avid backpacker, skier, climber, swimmer, and athlete. He participated in many orienteering events. He loved to travel and visited most of Europe as well as parts of Asia and Africa while in college. However, by the age of 17, he had found his lifelong passion, scuba diving. He joined the Kalmar Scuba Diving Club in his hometown. He dived all across Poland, joining other clubs and becoming closest with Skorpena Diving Club in Olsztyn, Poland. There, he met his future wife, Eva Domaracka. They traveled across Europe together, eventually immigrating to the United States in February 1991 following their wedding. This is where they decided to start their family, pursue their careers, and build a life together. Marian became a physical education teacher, inspiring his students to love athletics for over 20 years at Forest Park School, District 91. Above all, Marian passed on his love for exploration and adventure to his children. As teachers, Marian and Eva were fortunate to take summer-long trips with their children and beloved dog, Coco. Each year, the family set out for a cross-country camping trip, visiting national parks and spending valuable time together. They spent their days kayaking, hiking, and swimming. At night, they sat around the campfire, counting stars that stretched out in millions. Each winter, they were joined on ski trips by friends who became family. The group rented a big house, skiing together into the new year. Everyone who knew Marian knew how much he dearly loved his wife and children. He had endless stories to tell of his 2 sons and daughter, and his greatest pride was being their father. His smile was never bigger than when he was with his family. Throughout these years, scuba diving remained a big part of his life. Marian spent almost every weekend diving. He dived it all, in caves, oceans, rivers, shipwrecks, under ice, and at night. He always added to his collection of equipment and certifications with childlike excitement. With each dive, he fell in love again. Marian had traveled to Florida with a group during the holidays with the purpose of cave diving, but he remained in North Florida to continue diving solo when the remainder of the group traveled back home. Marian was a certified and experienced cave diver who was also certified and experienced on the model of closed-circuit rebreather he was using during the trip. At some point prior to this dive, while still in the company of the dive group, Marian's rebreather fell from a pickup truck tailgate, damaging the fissure connector, thus preventing the use of the unit's shearwater petrol computer to monitor PO2. PO2, partial pressure of oxygen, reflects the amount of oxygen gas dissolved in the blood. Despite knowing his equipment was faulty, Marian persisted in solo diving, determined to explore Cow Springs on his next dive, scheduled for January the 6th. Many consider Cow Spring to be among the most beautiful of all north-central Florida cave diving sites. Although no signs mark the way to Cow Spring, it is relatively easy to find, provided you follow directions. A few hundred yards into the woods, the Cow Spring entrance road ends, and you will find parking under the trees near the north side of the sinkhole. The easiest and safest way to enter the water is to take the trail around the sink's left side. This leads to a series of natural stone ledges and steps on the east side of the sinkhole. In years past, access to Cow Spring was available intermittently, as various landowners would, at times, gate or post the property. With the purchase of the site by the National Speleological Society Cave Diving Section, however, access was assured for years to come. The majority of the Cow Spring system was surveyed during the mid-1980s by Wes Skillies, Woody Jasper, Lamar Hires, and Tom Morris. For many years, the upstream side of Cow Spring was accessible only to divers using side-mounted bottles, and only if such divers knew where to find the very obscure spring entrance. That is, until Lamar Hires was walking to the water with a group of cave diving students. As he passed two local open water divers on the trail leading down to the water's edge, he overheard them discuss having reached a depth of 70 feet, or 21 meters. Knowing that this was normally impossible, using back-mounted cylinders, Lamar offered these two a free cave diving course if they would show him where they had been. As it turned out, these two untrained divers had managed to discover a second entrance to upstream Cow, one that had eluded experienced cave divers for years. The discovery of a back-mounted entrance to Cow Spring brought both elation and fear. On the one hand, it meant that nearly any cave diver could now see the very beautiful upstream Cow passageway, a passageway largely undamaged by the onslaught of divers who visit the area's other popular sites. On the other hand, this very accessibility now put upstream Cow's fragile formations in peril. There have been several documented incidents of damage, which are reasons for concern. For these reasons, many cave divers who know how to do so are reluctant to divulge exactly how one gets into upstream Cow. Neither the old side mount or new back mount entrance are something divers are likely to find on their own. Therefore, the only way most cave divers are likely to get into upstream Cow is to be shown how to do so by another diver who trusts their ability to not cause damage. The upstream entrance to Cow Springs has a major restriction requiring moderate body and equipment manipulation to pass through a roughly vertical to horizontal transition at about 40 feet of depth. The upstream leg of the cave consists largely of one tunnel, although there are a few offshoots that generally go only a short distance or loop back to the main line. Access to upstream of Cow should be limited to those with exceptional skills and experience under their belts, as this is an extremely fragile system. Only those with 100 recent post-full cave certification dives should even begin to consider diving this site. This is an extremely fragile system. Divers must ensure their buoyancy control is excellent prior to entering this system, as it contains spectacular claybanks and delicate girthite formations throughout that are easily damaged, as well as challenging high flow and additional restrictions beyond the entrance. The flow is generally brisk. In fact, between rock stream drop and Not My Fault, an area with few environmentally sound handholds, there is a polypropylene pull-along line to facilitate getting through a section of cave where it is often impossible to make headway by kicking alone. Depths run in the 60-foot or 18-meter range for the first 300 feet or 90 meters of penetration. Here, they drop to the 70-foot or 21-meter range until one reaches Not My Fault, roughly 700 feet or 210 meters from the entrance. Upstream of Not My Fault, one encounters depths in excess of 100 feet or 30 meters. Strictly speaking, Cow Spring is not a spring at all, but a sinkhole with both spring and siphon sides. Water flows toward Cow Spring from the northeast, in the same general direction as it does to the neighboring Peacock Orange Grove and Telford systems. From a depth of 70 feet, or 21 meters, This water wells up through the boulders at the base of the sinkhole's debris cone, then flows into either of the two siphon tunnels on its west side. From here, the water travels another 500 to 600 feet, or 150 to 180 meters, to emerge at two resurgences along the north bank of the Suwannee River, which, together, are known as Running Spring. As yet, no one has successfully made the connection between Cow and Running Springs. Marion arrived at Cow Springs on January 6, 2023, for his intended dive. He made an unsafe and ineffective field repair to his rebreather, following the damage to the unit's fisher cable. Unable to repair the broken connector, Marianne reportedly cut the cable and then used a heat shrink wrap over the end of the cut cable in an attempt to waterproof the cable end. After completing his equipment checks, Marion proceeded towards the upstream entrance of Cow Springs. Water leaking under the shrink wrap and the cable being exposed to water caused false readings with his rebreather units, oxygen sensors, which would have been displayed on the heads-up display. Realizing he was encountering a problem, Marion attempted to bail out, but was only able to close the dive surface valve halfway before the lever became unscrewed, preventing him from fully closing the loop. The model of CCR Marion was using is of the constant mass flow design. Once the valve is open, oxygen will flow until either the valve is closed or the cylinder bleeds dry. Marianne began to turn back toward open water as he attempted to deploy the regulator from one bailout cylinder. As he began to turn, the line he was still in the process of laying became tangled around the deployed bailout regulator and his body, preventing him from reaching the deployed second stage. He then attempted to deploy the second stage from his second bailout tank, but either accidentally latched onto the inflator hose rather than the second stage hose, or he was using the inflator hose to pull this bailout cylinder's second stage within reach when he lost consciousness. A bailout procedure should be a fairly simple task, one that is taught and practiced during rebreather training. In this case, Marion had long hoses on both of his bailout regulators, which were secured to the cylinders, and as described above, one regulator became entangled in the guideline during deployment, and the second was not immediately available since the cylinder was no longer bungeed against Marion's body. This is not an uncommon configuration, but the entanglement of his initial bailout regulator and this second regulator being out of reach became an insurmountable problem in the limited available time. If he had at least one of his bailout regulators secured in the triangle formed by his mouth and shoulders, bailout gas would have been immediately available. Also, the fact that the dive surface valve knob came off with the dive surface valve, neither fully opened nor closed, meant going back on the loop was not an option. The following day, on January 7th, 2023, Marion's van was observed still parked at the site with an O2 bottle and guideline in the spring basin that could be seen from the deck. The Suwannee County Sheriff's Office was notified of Marion's disappearance. After calling the Suwannee County Sheriffs, the complainant called the International Underwater Cave Rescue and Recovery to advise a diver was suspected lost and deceased due to the length of elapsed time. She also notified the NSS/CDS as owners of the site. Upon their arrival, 2 divers from the IUCRR entered the water to effect a search for Marion, but returned after only a few minutes to advise the victim had been located at the entrance to the upstream cave. As indicated, Marion was diving a CCR unit for which he was trained, but had only a heads-up display to monitor the breathing gas in the loop, since the Fisher connection to a petrol computer was previously damaged. He had 2 80 cubic feet aluminium cylinders for bailout. The dive supply valve on Marion's rebreather was in half-open, half-closed position, and the lever used to open-close the diver's supply valve had become unscrewed and was laying on the cave floor next to his body. Marion's guideline, which had not yet been tied into the gold line, was loosely wrapped once around his body. Entangled in the line was a deployed long hose second stage from one of his bailout cylinders. Marion had a death grip on the inflator hose coming from the first stage of his other bailout cylinder. The regulator second stage was not deployed from this cylinder, but the cylinder was no longer secured in a bungee alongside Marion's body. The inflators on his dry suit and buoyancy control device functioned properly. Both AL-80 bailouts were full, as was the victim's dilutant cylinder. The oxygen cylinder on the CCR was empty. Marion's computer showed no movement after 10 minutes following his initial descent. Following the removal of Marion's body with his gear from the water, examination of the cut fissure cable showed the heat shrink wrap over the cut end easily slipped off, and water had entered under the wrap and was in contact with the cut cable end. His body was subsequently transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy, which listed the cause of death as accidental drowning. Following the autopsy and release of the ME's report, the autopsy report was provided to another pathologist without any further information as to the above incident. This review detailed indications that Marion may have suffered from immersion pulmonary edema. If true, this could explain the reason he attempted to bail out. Finally, though solo diving is not uncommon in the cave diving community due to the redundancy of breathing gas and gear, had he been diving with a buddy, this accident would likely have ended as an incident or near miss, rather than a fatality. Marion had just begun his dive and was still in shallow water and within a 3-minute swim to the entry point. A buddy would have likely been able to assist Marion in acquiring one of his bailout regulators or share air with him to make a safe exit, or at least get him to the surface in a timely manner to better the chance for his survival. It can be surmised the O2 cylinder on the CCR bled dry during the 24+ hours Marion was down prior to recovery. Forest Park's elementary school district continued to keep the memory of Marion alive as the faculty and district families gathered to walk a K for Mr. K, approximately 5 months after his passing, on June 6, 2023. He is remembered as a loving husband, a devoted father, a cherished brother. May he rest in peace. This has been Gripping Horror. I hope to see you in the next one.